Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 154. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation, and generally Episode 154 on June 30th. Not typically one of our most memorable episodes, but today will be a little bit different. A Monday blockbuster deal that I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. I'm sure you are as well, Dave. Minkah Fitzpatrick, no longer a Steeler. He goes back to Miami, and in exchange, Pittsburgh gets cornerback Jalen Ramsey, tight end Jonnu Smith, and there's also a 2027 Day 3 pick swap. But the headliners are Ramsey and Smith to Pittsburgh, Fitzpatrick back to Miami. Oh my goodness, what is happening? Is this real life? Is this Madden? Dave, help me out. And how are you?
Yeah, happy Manic Monday, and you and I already were together for a part of the podcast first thing this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time. As promised, we have an interview with Jay Morrison, who covers the Bengals, and we had already let people know ahead of time that was coming. And almost a moment we wrapped up that interview is when all the news, the trades started to come in. As Alex laid out there. So the timing couldn't have been better there. We hadn't even started our portion of the podcast yet. So there's that aspect of it. Yeah, we're not going to forget June 30th, 2025 for some time when it comes to the Steelers annals and just history of the team. And really this offseason, I think as a whole, will not soon be forgotten. And we had talked a little bit about the possibility of Jalen Ramsey in the past and how it just seems so messy. And when you look at the contract and the potential compensation, and that's why it felt very unlikely to happen. But the way you get through some of that unmessiness, I guess, is to trade away one of your star expensive players. That's one aspect that we didn't ever really talk about as far as Ramsey coming to Pittsburgh via the trade. When you look at it in totality, that it in a rearview mirror now, it seems like about the only way you're going to get something like this done. But the thought never really crossed my mind that to get a Ramsey deal done, and obviously the Jonnu Smith being part of this as well too, that it would take trading away Minkah Fitzpatrick, because once again and it's going to take a while for some of this to come out in the wash because of the Jalen Ramsey contract. There's an option bonus in there that's due in August, and that clouded up things a little bit, and it sounds like the Steelers are adding a little bit more cash to Ramsey's 2025 money as well. You would think that they're going to take this option bonus and spread it out either 4 or 5 years. We'll have to see how that plays out. The net impact of this, and there's a lot to still sort through. We'll have to see how they actually do this, but I think the net outcome of this is you're going to see the Steelers actually save a little bit of 2025 cap space, but up a little bit of their cash spending, if that makes sense, because what you're doing is you're dropping off $15.5 million in cash that Minkah was scheduled to earn this year, and then you're obviously going to replace it by the Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey deal, even though it'll be a large cash spending likely in 2025 for Ramsey. His cap hit, well, it should be under 10, I think, fairly easy here overall. So that's the way you get through that quote unquote messiness that we sort of talked about as part of if the Steelers were to trade for Jalen Ramsey in this thing. And Jonnu Smith, we talked about a little bit throughout earlier in the offseason, how it would make sense, and the link to Arthur Smith and the love of the tight ends. And that seemed a lot more plausible, him coming to Pittsburgh, than it did, a Jalen Ramsey. But now you've got both of those guys coming to Pittsburgh. You obviously have Minkah Fitzpatrick going out the door back to Miami. And man, that's a lot to chew on. I guess first and foremost is, as we try to wrap our head around this, is the Steelers got better technically at corner. And we talked about, if Jalen Ramsey joins this team, they're a better team.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, we didn't talk about if Minkah goes out the door, and it does make you kind of wonder: are we going to see Jalen Ramsey play some safety? I mean, what kind of safety capability might Slay even have at this point in his career? Could we see a guy like Simmons come in now at a very, very reduced rate and add some stability to the safety room? What's Juan Thornhill's role in all this? There's a lot of stuff to filter through as a result of these trades now, especially when it comes to the secondary. Whew.
Didn't have to wait until July 4th for the fireworks, that's for sure.
Wow.
So I don't even know exactly where to begin here. I think what you had said about, did you get better at corner? You did, assuming Ramsey plays primarily there. But the question of any trade is, did you get better as a team? And so I ask you, I look at this deal, you add Ramsey, you add Smith. Those are valuable players who will have their role. You lose Minkah Fitzpatrick. Did Pittsburgh get better?
Well, we just had that conversation about sometimes it's good to wait to do these 90 and 30s, maybe an extra week, and maybe start trying to do 6 in a post and start doing, I don't know, what would that be? 90 and 15 or something like that. I might have to look at doing that, because I just wrote up Minkah Fitzpatrick, and we just talked about him the other day and how,
I mean, who would have thought Minkah was going to get, I'm going to cut you out, but who would have thought he was going to get traded? This was never even there was a conversation if he didn't have a good year this year, would he be on 2026? That was fine. We discussed that with Minkah, but not him being traded today before week 1.
Right. I mean, obviously the production, as we said, the splash play somehow he made the Pro Bowl last year, and that's obviously a popularity contest and all. He's only had 2 takeaways the last 2 years. He missed 6 games or so the year before. He fortunately came back and played the 17 last year. There was all the talk about the miscommunication and defense, and kind of wondered who was pointing the finger at where and how much Minkah's role played in that. How happy was Minkah about doing anything other than just playing center field on this team, and maybe occasionally rotating down to Rob and everything that went above and beyond just a traditional free safety position. All that said, I still felt fairly confident that if Minkah Fitzpatrick was healthy, now I'm not going to go out on a limb and say he's going to have 6 or 7 takeaways, but at least get somewhere back close to that takeaway player that he was a couple of years ago. But it goes without saying that the last 2 years, the nuts and bolts of it has been, he missed the games a couple of years ago, and obviously injuries happen. You can't predict those kind of things. It was unfortunate with him, but he returned for 17 games last season, had a new counterpart, a very good one in Elliott, and yet still only had 1 takeaway. We get into how much was that on him, the schematics, quarterback staying away, it feels like there was a lot of it involved there. And then you fast forward into past this season, were they going to, what was the trade? What was the talks going to be like a year from now? When there was going to be talks about whether or not he's going to be up for a contract extension or not. Look, I mean, the player, if there was no, we came away with talking about Fitzpatrick about what? There was no way that he could have the same kind of season that he's had the last 2, correct?
When you say no way, as in What do you mean by that?
I mean, we got to see more splash plays, even if the tackles
Yes.
would have stayed the same, and if everything being equal, the playing in 17 games, we had to see more. We had to see more passes defensed and more splash plays, preferably interceptions and forced fumbles, right?
Yes, for the demands of his contract, of his role in the defense, of his previous caliber of play, he had to get back to that. Absolutely.
All right, and how many free safeties around the NFL on a yearly basis end up with 5 or 6 takeaways, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it just I was confident he could get back to that. That was what I had said when we talked about Minkah just
Right.
the other day.
I
And
thought he could rebound as well too. So I'm with you. I didn't think it'd be 6 or 7. I think that might be pushing it, but 4 or 5 definitely seemed like 4 or 5 takeaways certainly seemed to be like it was in the cards.
right, right. And we talked about him being the steady tackler and run defender and leader. And you were excited about, okay, Elliott and Minka paired together, Elliott on the extension, the continuity that would come with that, those guys being in their second season. And now he's gone. And so the question is, what was it about Minka that made Pittsburgh feel like he was expendable? That's one question. And then the more important question, I guess, is okay, who replaces Minkah Fitzpatrick? And you went through the Rolodex of names, and that's one shoe that still has to drop, and we have to gain clarity on that's going to help us decide how good of a trade this is. And if Pittsburgh did get better, the ultimate question is it going to be Ramsey? Is it going to be Slay? Is it going to be Thornhill? Is it going to be an outside addition? You mentioned Justin Simmons. Could that be on the table? More moves. You can't sit there and say Pittsburgh won't make more moves because they're showing they can make any move possible, and anything that we think is off the table should be on the table and should be considered. This is a franchise that has not won a playoff game since 2016. Everyone knows that. They feel the weight of it. They probably themselves feel like we are getting the same results no matter what we do, and so more changes needed to, you know, blow up this team in a sense. And I'm trying to gather this story in my head right now, but I think Mark Twain, the famous writer, always had a good quip. Familiar with him?
Oh, I know who he is. I never knew him personally, but
Yeah. No, I understand that. I believe
no,
the story
I
is
know who he is. I don't know where you're going with this. I mean, I know there's a lot of quotes out there from Mark Twain.
I barely understand it as well, but I think his name comes from Mark the Twain, which was an idea whenever they would have um, blocks in a river. You needed dynamite to blow it up, essentially, to be able to get this stuck part of the river with a bunch of logs or wood or something in the way, some barrier. You had to blow it up, essentially, and so that I think is what Pittsburgh feels like they have to do. In a sense, is they're stuck. I just had the article. They've won 9 or 10 games without a playoff win in 4 straight years. That's a NFL record since the 1978 season when the NFL went to a 16-game year. They feel like this is a team that is stuck in neutral, and they have to find a way to unstick it in a sense. And that is coming by making not only the radical move of trading away Minkah Fitzpatrick, but trading for DK Metcalf, which at the time was unprecedented, of pursuing Aaron Rodgers and all the other moves that have come with it.
What got Minkah Fitzpatrick traded out of Miami?
He wasn't happy with his role. That was Minkah wanting out. He was in his second year, and he didn't like being used as this chess piece that was slot, that was, did I say slot twice? That was strong safety, slot. He was all over the place. He was a chess piece, and he wanted to be a free safety. And that's what Pittsburgh took the chance on him and played him as a free safety. And that's why that deal happened, to my recollection.
Do you think I knew that? I was just prodding you do you think in any way, shape, or form him maybe still feeling like that has ended up in him being moved back now? Could that have played a role with him not being a fan of being because they do need to do something in that secondary to make it less predictable about where Minkah is, really, right?
Again, I didn't think it was as big of an issue as others are last year. I'm willing to listen. I think there was some staticness to the defense because of Beanie Bishop early in the season, but Minkah went back to playing free safety.
Right, but maybe the Steelers have ideas of how their secondary want to go moving forward with him moving around more, and it's not something that he might be so much of a fan of.
Maybe. I mean, we're going to speculate, and I don't know when we're going to hear from anybody in the front office next, I guess, until report day, training camp. It's the first time we'll hear from Mike Tomlin. I don't know when Omar Khan's going to be speaking. Maybe he does something in the offseason before camp with Pat McAfee. That would be helpful. I don't know, but I mean, they've been a single high defense. And yeah, maybe they want to change that and run more cover two, and they want to run more rotation, and they want these guys to be able to be more positionless. And Ramsey does offer a lot of versatility. So possibly, I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
All right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. You know, who else is on the way at this point? You know, is Justin Simmons a possibility?
Yeah, I can't say anything's off the table after these kinds of moves. I mean, how could you sit there and say, and you're just obviously just throwing the question to me, but if you're listening, I mean, I think everything has to be considered. And that is the ultimate question to me is, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, okay, that's one thing, but then replacing him is another. And I don't have any clarity on how that looks right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how that plays out. Look, I mean, you're trading a guy that's a Pro Bowler, obviously has been an All Pro, and I mean, you're getting a quality guy albeit up in years in Jalen Ramsey, and I think they got better at the cornerback position overall. We talked about ahead of this too. The Steelers are a better team with him in the secondary, but at what cost of Minkah being moved on?
I mean, are they a better team in the secondary as a whole? They're better at corner. I agree.
They're better
no
at
question.
Yeah,
but
you have to break
question.
this thing down into pieces, and whether or not you firmly believe that Minkah could get back to 2022 Minkah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there uncertain. I think if you make a trade like this, you have to sit there and say, man, this is such a clear trade of why you do this, and you clearly have gotten better. And I don't think I'm there at this point.
Okay, I mean that's definitely understandable.
Here's my other thought too that I've had, Dave. Let's say hypothetically they traded for Jalen Ramsey straight up. We had that conversation. Minkah was not involved. No player was involved in going back to Miami. What would Jalen Ramsey have fetched? And we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a third or fourth round? Didn't we talk about that?
We talked about probably a fourth round pick, given the contract, and maybe Miami has to eat a little bit of that money, but Pittsburgh would take on a lot of that contract, and Miami
That's what
had
made
a lot
it so messy.
Right. That was one portion of the messiness of it. Contractually, it's why Miami was having a hard time finding a suitor. The Rams had interest, and a reunion made sense with Sean McVay in LA, but McVay came out and said that, yeah, it's hard to get this deal done. A lot of obstacles there. And that's probably why Ramsey had a very narrow trade market for his age, for his play that's not as strong as it once was, for the fit, for the contract. Okay, so probably a fourth on Jalen Ramsey. What would it cost to trade for Jonnu Smith straight up, no player coming back?
At most a fifth, I would think.
So we have a fourth rounder. I'll even say a third rounder for Jalen Ramsey and a fifth rounder at most for Jonnu Smith. How does that turn into Minkah Fitzpatrick?
I think just because of the money aspect that was involved.
So you think for Pittsburgh to get this deal done, they said we have to trade Minkah. There's just no other way to acquire these guys and make it work.
Look, I mean, they would have to not let loose. That was the messiest thing about this is if either Miami was going to have to eat a lot of cash, I felt, or the Steelers were going to have to dump some cash.
But you trade Minkah Fitzpatrick just in a salary dump move? This is not a salary dump player.
I think there's obviously another layer to this. And I do wonder if how much of it is the whole miscommunication thing that might have involved Minkah and going back to some of those pointing of the fingers last year by the defense, and how, if ever all but one are on the same, you start trying to piece together the puzzle a little bit and all like that. And then you start talking about how comfortable do you think Minkah was in moving around. I do wonder how much more layer of that onion there is related to Minkah that 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 played into this outside
Fair.
of just the money and compensation and all.
Fair. I mean, I get that. And Minka said, I don't want to be here. I want out. Then it's a different conversation. There's no indication of that right now. Could something happen later on? We're going to hear a lot about the fallout. We're all still, even the NFL insiders are reacting to that. Adam Schefter's at Oakmont, apparently golfing today. So just to kind of tell you that nobody really thought something big was going to happen at this very moment. Post 4th of July is whenever these things kind of tend to pick back up before training camp. But it's just hard for me to wrap my head around how you go from Ramsey, probably day 3 value, Jonnu Smith, definitely day 3 value, and that turns into trading away your multi-time All-Pro, Pro Bowl, free safety.
All right.
I don't even know what other angle to take. Let's focus on, okay, Ramsey's role. I mean, this is a guy that, can still be a playmaker. And not just in interceptions, not just in coverage, but he had 6 tackles for a loss last season. He had a sack last season. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's played a lot in the slot. And so while the contract was messy, in some ways I thought Ramsey was a better fit, better player than Jair Alexander. Well, healthier than Jair Alexander, probably the better player pound for pound, all things considered, health included, but also a lot more flexible to work somebody in the slot. So I can certainly see the allure of adding Ramsey. And while there is going to be some balancing between Slay and Porter and Ramsey and how all those pieces fit, I think you can make it work.
You ever seen Pulp Fiction? And he says you drop, they're trying to find his wallet. It's the one with the bad bad EMF on it. I mean, you got at least a guy that's physical, that is respected still at this stage throughout his career, right? A very physical player. The only thing is now at this point, can he stay healthy at his age, and how much will they move him around, and how does he react to being moved around, and can he still deliver those plays? I mean, you look back at a couple of those interceptions that he made just last year with the Dolphins, some really phenomenal plays. The guy is as heady as they come as far as his coverages go. He's not afraid to gamble, if you will, and still very. Even at his age, I'd hate for him to have to hit me. I'll tell you that. I mean, very physical players. So, I think you're banking on that. And plus, we'll have, they'll have roster bonus decisions, I think, next year and all like that. And, you could potentially get not just a 1-year player, but a multi-year player, depending on how he plays this year. You do have to worry, is this a guy that every year is going to be wanting more and more cash? But it sounds like they at least got him taken care of for this year and over that hump right now. I think we just go back to what we said prior to this thing in the initial talk about Jalen Ramsey. Him being added to your team is not a bad thing.
Right. No, it's not. But the whole cost of everything else, gets entangled in that. And the ultimate question is if you're a better team today than you were yesterday. But I can certainly see that aspect of Ramsey. And while he's no longer the elite corner he was probably with the Rams several years ago, he's still a very good corner and one of the better in football. And you have a 3-man trio of Slay and Porter and Ramsey. And how many teams have a better top 3 than Pittsburgh right now? Very few, if any.
Yeah. This is going to be, we'll see how it pans out in free safety position, but it's going to be, it's going to be hard to throw the football, against some of these corners, you would think.
Just the concern is you can't allow the big play. And
Right.
Pittsburgh's defense did a really good job of that last year. 2023, the pass defense gave up a lot of big plays, in part because of all the injuries, including to Minkah. Last year, that was largely solved, even during the losing streak. I mean, there were some big plays in the run. They were getting gashed, but even in the pass game, that wasn't necessarily the big issue, the big explosive pass play. There was some miscommunication busts, and those were creating, big plays for opposing offenses. But just overall, look at the numbers. The defense did keep a lid on things, and Minkah certainly played a large role in that. On Jonnu Smith, we talked about him a lot. I think people understand his fit. This is an offensive weapon. I don't think Pittsburgh will view him and typecast him as just a tight end. He's somebody that can stand up and move around, a little bit like Pat Freiermuth. And obviously, there's strong connections and deep ties with Arthur Smith, drafted. Jonnu Smith was in Tennessee when Arthur Smith was there. They worked together for several seasons. Arthur Smith traded for Jonnu Smith in 2023 when Arthur Smith was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. There's not much explanation needed about what attracted Jonnu Smith to Pittsburgh and why he's ultimately here.
Oh yeah, I mean, we talked about the links and all prior, especially after the team lost Parham to the Achilles injury and all, and wondering if indeed because of the lack of wide receivers kind of out there available to this team, and maybe the direction this team could go that way, adding a playmaker and like Jonnu Smith, who essentially is a wide receiver / tight end. Would that be kind of more appropriate, especially with as many tight end personnel groupings that Arthur Smith likes to run? And he obviously has the familiarity, but dating back to the Tennessee days with Jonnu Smith. And the wonder was just would any of this just come to fruition the rest of the offseason, even though there was a little bit of smoke, a few weeks ago. So, it ended up being part of this package. It does call into question now. I mean, you obviously got Pat Freiermuth, you got Jonnu Smith, you got Darnell Washington. This team's probably going to keep at least 4 tight ends, maybe 5 now. I don't know. But what is it? I mean, it further calls into question the Connor Hayward roster spot. Who is your backup true blocking tight end, I guess, to a Darnell Washington, should you lose him, God forbid, during a game and all, or do you even need that, aspect with obviously you would rely a little bit more on a Pat Freiermuth in line and all, but it certainly looks like this team is ready to use a lot of 12, 13, maybe even 14 personnel this season and have some fun with Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth with splitting them out.
We already noted that Pittsburgh, I think, was second highest in the NFL last year in 13 personnel usage, but they were, I think, bottom 10 in efficiency in 13 personnel usage. And so they were using it a lot. They weren't getting good results from it. You had Connor Hayward, Michael Pruitt as your third tight end last year. Neither really offered you a ton offensively. Pruitt a little bit as a Y on the ball blocker. Hayward a little versatile, split flow, H-back, but obviously Jonnu Smith, big upgrade over that. And so I think that's the reason why Jonnu Smith comes to Pittsburgh. The question is, okay, the reason why he's out of Miami in the first place and the whole start of his rumors to Pittsburgh weeks ago was the contract. He wanted a new deal with Miami coming off a Pro Bowl season. He's about to turn 30. He wants to cash in. Is there a new deal attached with this trade to Pittsburgh? Nothing reported as of right now, but you have to think if that trade is happening, he feels like there's a good chance he will get paid by Pittsburgh before training camp.
It sounds like Smith will get a 1-year contract extension for Adam Schefter.
Oh, did that just come out, or did I totally miss it?
That was from 2 hours ago.
Okay, then so just a lot going on.
That was part of it. Smith will get a 1-year contract extension for $12 million, confirmed by agents Drew Rosenhaus and Robert Bailey. So that's his extra money right there. So now you have him under contract for presumably the 2026 season, which makes that move even more attractive for the Steelers, because you're not getting essentially a 1-year rental when it comes to him.
So I apologize. I completely missed that. It has been the craziest day all around. So it's a 1-year, $12 million extension. Is that a fair way to sum it up? Or
yeah,
that's
what they're saying. He had, because he had 3 void years, I believe, on his contract past this year. So what did we say he was set to get in cash this year prior to this? He was set to get $4 million, in a little more than $4 million in just cash this year, when you combine his base salary and his per game roster bonuses and his his workout bonuses. You would have to imagine that some of this money, as part of this $12 million add-on, is going to go towards cash towards this year, right? So that's why I talked at the top of this show about the add-ons with Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. That's why I think you're going to see this team save a little bit of cap space as a net, but you're going to see the cash goes up a little bit, because you'd have to imagine part of this extension for Jonnu includes a signing bonus for this year and then a base salary of, I don't know, 6-7 million or whatever it is for next year. So you're going to see Jonnu is going to come out of this with getting more cash in 2025 as part of this, which is what he wanted, right?
Right, yeah, he wanted the cash in his pocket now, and he gets it, so good information there, and that was honestly news to me. It has been just a wild, wild day of Steelers news. Is this one of the biggest trades ever in NFL history? Not just for the time of year, which it certainly is, but ever? I know there's the Herschel Walker trade, there's other ones we can point to, and probably ones I'm forgetting about, but at least in the last at least this century, it has to be right up there.
I mean, how many times do you see a player for player, all pro bowler type deal in and of itself, and then uh add on one of the league's better tight ends on top of it? And but yeah, it's pretty. I don't know. I had to go back and look at, is it most? It definitely is up there. I had to check 3 or 4 times on all the Twitter usernames to make sure these weren't fakes or anything like that. But yeah, this is like I said at the top. This June 30th will go down as a big day in Steelers annals. That's for sure.
Per Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports in their research department, the Minkah and Jalen Ramsey trade is the first time since at least 2002 where two five-time plus Pro Bowlers were traded for each other. So long time coming, and that's at least 2002, probably as far back as their database reliably goes. So yeah, this one is a blockbuster, it's seismic in so many ways. And do you think what I said earlier resonates and is accurate, that Pittsburgh feels like they need to do something radically different to get the different results that they've been missing for a team that has been stuck at 9 or 10 wins without a playoff win for many, many seasons in a row?
Yeah, well, how's the old saying about the definition of insanity and doing the same thing over and over? They definitely cannot be accused. They've done some things this offseason that we have just not seen this team do in a long, long time. I mean, you go out there and you trade for an outside wide receiver in DK Metcalf. Not only that, you give up a second round pick to get that. Then you turn around and make him one of the highest paid players APY on the team as an outsider. That's just that. As we talked at the time, that was stop the presses kind of stuff just in and of itself there, and that alone. Then you go out and you had all the courtship of the Aaron Rodgers stuff, and even though you got him at a depressed deal overall, I mean, you're talking about a big time name. If I would have told you a couple of years ago that Aaron Rodgers would end up a Pittsburgh Steelers, in 2025, 3 years ago, and even 2 years ago, you would have told me I'm freaking crazy there. And even on the heels of having this team having Russell Wilson and Justin Fields as their quarterbacks, then you fast forward into, I guess, deciding not to re-sign a guy like Najee, which obviously isn't monumental, but it's still kind of newsworthy overall. Guy had 4 1,000-yard seasons and didn't miss a game. You go into the draft this year, and I mean, you get a quarterback in round 6 as opposed to earlier, and we kind of thought, yeah, they might go earlier there. You get an outside linebacker, even though we kind of thought that outside linebacker might be on the shopping list of draft picks this year. Not many of us thought there would be one as early as there was this year. Deshaun Elliott, the extension with him was kind of outside the box for what we've seen for players signed the previous offseason to, per se, 2-year deals. They saw what they had in him and decided to go out there and lock him up. So that was to some degree a stop the presses kind of moves there. And then you fast forward to what you have happen today, trading a Pro Bowler, a guy that most of the fans obviously liked, owned the jerseys on, a previous All Pro. You're trading him to for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, and then you're going out there and you're getting a move tight end that has familiarity with Arthur Smith. So there has been a lot of stuff independently. If one of those things would have happened, and that was it, you're saying, man, they did something that we're not accustomed to. And now you have in totality, I guess, 4 or 5 things here that have happened that are outside the norm, and it really does play like Omar Khan saying, "I got to get this team over the hump," right? Rooney wants that one playoff win, and I damn sure better not come away with at a minimum that this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, does this put more and more pressure on Pittsburgh to get over the hump and not just win a playoff game, but maybe even do something more? How do you make all of these moves without the expectation that something big is on the other side?
Let's go back to the whole Ramsey versus Fitzpatrick. Did they get better thing? Which of those two players is most likely was most likely to deliver the most takeaways on a defensive side of football this season?
Between the two, who is going to get more takeaways?
Right.
Probably Ramsey, just based. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Minkah would have bounced back. I mean, I think they're going to have similar. Go ahead.
Well, what do you think his ceiling would have been? 4 or 5 takeaways for Minkah?
I mean, his ceiling is 6 or 7 if he goes back to playing Minkah ball. So I mean, that's probably his ceiling.
Okay. And so do you just kind of view it as a wash as potential takeaways then? Because obviously if you get more takeaways out of one than you thought that you were the other, then obviously the big question and still will be until we see this thing sorted through is, are you going to give up those 40-yard home runs on the back end?
Right. I mean, obviously the takeaways are really important, but I don't want to sit there and say, well, I think Ramsey would have had 4 takeaways and Minkah 3, so Ramsey's better. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily in that quite pure production terms. There are different layers and elements to run defense and tackling and communication and the pieces fitting. I'm not saying that Ramsey can't be an asset in all those things, but those are other variables to consider.
All right. I do wonder how much of this will ultimately come out. The beat writers will probably say it after the fact, kind of maybe in the same measure that we are, that I do wonder how much of this is Minkah just not being a huge fan of doing anything more than being tied to the post. And in other words, is the same thing that got Minkah sit out of Miami sort of the reason he's going back to Miami now?
Maybe. I just don't know.
And the whole and I do wonder if we roll back and pull back up some of these comments about miscommunication and kind of the vague comments about, who might have been at the root of some of this if the fingers weren't more pointed at Minkah.
But are you trading Minkah because of a 4-game slide where he might have had a couple communication busts where there's probably a bunch of other people involved in that too? Are you really trading Minkah because of that?
Not just because of that one thing. No, that's why I kind of say I do wonder kind of the layers and how much of this we'll actually find out as we move along here.
Okay,
with that being perhaps a piece of it with the communication and the pointing of the fingers and all like that. No, that's probably not the only reason. And look, like I said, I had to check the Twitter username several times just to make sure I was digesting. Not only just to see, because when the first bit broke, it was Jalen Ramsey's coming, right?
Right. And there was a long silence of no compensation reported, which you were
right.
Like, where was the compensation here?
And then what I'm thinking in my head is, damn, how they going to get this? I was going in my head, yeah, they could probably get this done from the cap standpoint, but how are they going to go from the cash standpoint outside of overspending even more than what because I've said all along this team's got a lot of cash to spend, right? But there was a point where I thought they wouldn't go over X amount, and had they kept both those, they would have obviously gone way over what I projected they would have cash spending. So I was going through my head first and foremost how they're going to is this team just going all in from a cash perspective? And then 5 minutes later, 8 minutes later is when we got the Minkah thing that went, and then you're going, okay, well, because we did talk about how messy it was going to be to try to get a Jalen Ramsey deal done. And we didn't even throw out the aspect of a player for player trade. And in the end, that it seems like that was the only way they were going to get this done.
Right, it seems so. The other elements to consider is Pittsburgh traded a younger player. Not that Minkah was super young, but still 28, turning 29 here in a little bit, for Jalen Ramsey, who turns 31 in October, and Jonnu Smith, who turns 30 in August. And so you're getting older. You're getting guys that are either at or about to hit that 30 number. And nothing says they can't play well still this year and beyond. But you do wonder about potential decline in play of Jalen Ramsey, whose play probably has declined a little bit over the years. And, when does Jonnu Smith hit that clip as that athletic move receiving tight end?
All right, Adam Schefter says the Steelers are taking on the bulk of their new cornerback Jalen Ramsey's $26.6 million contract per sources. Dolphins responsible for a smaller portion. So there is there's going to be a little bit of offset within some of this. Now, I believe Ramsey already had a $4 million roster bonus in March that the Dolphins were already on the hook for. So it appears that on top of that Miami's going to eat probably a little bit more money of this to equal this out. Then once again, there's this whole 18 point something million dollar option bonus in August that you would think the Steelers are going to have to prorate some of that out depending on how much the Dolphins. There once again, that goes back to the messiness that we talked about with it seeming unlikely that they'd get something done. So we'll have to all this. We're going to learn more about this over the next week until this thing officially hits, or at least somebody comes up with the full monetary details of what the cap charge will be, what the actual cash spending will be, and all like that. But that's what led to us talking about how messy. Sure, we both said Jalen Ramsey would be great on the Steelers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was just the messiness of the contract, the compensation, and everything that made it seem unlikely. Now, we obviously didn't talk any about, once again, about Minkah being involved in it, but now looking back in the rearview mirror, it seems like that was probably going to be part of the only way that they get this done was to dump an expensive player as part of this.
Yeah, it's just still. I still have questions, and maybe some of that is just from the jarring nature of it, and I'm not used to Pittsburgh making these types of moves, and so it is reactionary to sit there and say, well, this is a big move, this is kind of scary, how do I feel about it? I mean, I do understand that as I kind of try to process, as we all try to process what's going on and what this looks like and the fallout, next steps, and everything, but I don't know, Dave. I was happy to have Minkah Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh. I still think he was happy in Pittsburgh. I think he still could have been an impact player. I think he got better in the secondary with things like Darius Slay. And while I really think this comes from a feeling of Pittsburgh needing to make some big moves to hopefully get big changes and big results forward, I still think the way to do that was in part how they were building around through the trenches and the offensive line and the defensive line. That's how teams truly get better. It's the trenches, it's quarterback. And once you get those pieces in place, you can ascend as a franchise. The Texans are an example of that. The Commanders are an example of that. So, was the only path to get better to make some radical moves? I don't know if it needed to be quite like this.
All right, we got more on this now from Ian Rappaport. The Dolphins had previously paid Jalen Ramsey $4 million this offseason, and that was his March roster bonus, and added another $3 million to facilitate the trade for a total of $7 million. The Steelers will pay the rest of the $26.6 million this year. So I guess if let's see. I'm guessing around what night. The way this is framed, it looks like the Steelers are taking on around 18 or 19 million of this. And
that's my interpretation.
And if they dump 15.5 million of this, then that helps equal it out a little bit. So maybe the Steelers won't have to prorate any of this option bonus. And remember, as part of my cash thing, and I even posted this the other day about a cash update, that there was still like another $3 or $4 million out there in cash after even giving a Boswell a $3 million raise or $4 million raise this offseason that the Steelers still had to play with. This would about make that up, right? If you're talking say a difference between 15.5 and let's call it 19.5 million. There's your difference in the extra cash that the Steelers we're going to spend. Now, obviously, you still got the Jonnu Smith thing in there, and how much additional cash you're paying in there, but it's probably not going to be outlandish with how they do that with the cash either there. So this is all starting to make more and more sense by the 30 minutes.
Yeah, and you figured it would. I mean, obviously, there was a way they were going to have to get this deal to fit, and it was a matter of waiting on the details and seeing the particulars of it. So Pittsburgh's still paying a bulk of that salary, but we knew Miami would have to probably eat a little bit of it at the least to help facilitate this trade. So yeah, you knew the numbers would come out in the wash and would balance, and we're getting that detail now. It seems like.
All right, so look, not the same old Steelers. You can't say that this offseason, and at the very least, you got to be excited from a fan standpoint that it does look like this team is making notable effort to not be the same old Steelers in 2025. That it is very important with them to shake things up enough where they think that they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, not just a win a playoff game team. So and hanging another banner for Mike Tomlin for winning season. This team at least is giving the appearance that they're doing things they haven't done before in an effort to try to win a Super Bowl this year. And at the very least, whether or not this thing blows up in their face or not, and they end up going 6-11, you got to take your hat off and hand it to them for at least going way outside, like we just rolled down the 4 or 5 things. That how uncommon of a move is this for the team, and we're saying that now on 4 or 5 different things that this team's done this offseason.
Yeah, no, I get that, and this is not Pittsburgh just making let's make a little move here to get over the hump. Let's win the wild card game and kind of get that drought stopped. I mean, publicly, the Steelers always say we want to win the Super Bowl, but their actions really are backing that up. Now, are the Steelers Super Bowl contenders right now, Dave? Have they become that?
Well, I can't wait. I want to know what they're going to do on the back end of this secondary. Let me phrase it. Let me answer your question with a question.
Mm-hmm.
If this team doesn't give up, but let's say a couple of home run, 40-plus yard plays up over the top of their head, and whoever plays free safety gets 2 interceptions, whoever that player is this team a better team?
If you're laying it out that way, I mean, probably, but again, there were so many layers to it of run defense, of communication, of schematics, of Minkah's influence of quarterbacks at times shying away from his airspace. I mean, there's just a lot going on there that it's hard to answer that. Obviously, the framing would suggest we're more likely to say yes than no based on that hypothetical, but it's hard to kind of talk in a vacuum like that.
From where we sit right now, is this defense, at least on paper, seem less predictable in the secondary than it did coming into Monday?
Yes, I think so. I think it's less predictable overall as a defense. The defensive line upgrades, and you have the strong edge group. We know they're probably going to make some tweaks and be a little less static with their edge guys this year. That's been discussed. We've debated the worthiness of it, but it probably will be some wrinkle to this defense. So yeah, I think it's a more versatile defense. The addition of Juan Thornhill for big nickel packages, Ramsey. Yes, I think you're going to see a defense that is more multiple.
All right, and is that a bad thing?
No, not inherently. I think it's a good thing to have versatility, be able to match up based on individual game plans and opponent strengths, and you're going to have the gamut from run-heavy teams to pass-heavy teams to tight-end-heavy teams to everything under the sun. So that can be good. The question I have, though, and there's a balance here between the need to make some pretty radical moves and shake things up, and there's certainly value in that. As you said, definition insanity. Can't plant corn, get corn. That's kind of the thought. You have to do something different if you want a different result. But how much is too much? How much new is too new? And all these new pieces have to fit together and also do it at least in this year in the Aaron Rodgers chapter and make it all fit offensively and defensively. Can the group coalesce and come together? We've seen some really good off seasons in the past, the Eagles and their dream team and that kind of stuff. And what's on paper doesn't always match up into
Sure.
performance because the chemistry and the newness takes a lot of adjusting to. It creates growing pains, and so players are not able to play to their individual talents.
And look, I mean, we haven't talked a lot about Jonnu Smith as part of this. I mean, we obviously spent some time, but I mean that's a plus to this offense, right?
Jonnu Smith,
Yeah.
individually, sure, that's a plus. Yeah.
I mean, and if it cost you let's say whatever movement you went backwards maybe on the defense with losing Minkah, and whatever offset you want to call that for the addition of Ramsey, it feels like you're making it up at least to some degree with Jonnu Smith on offense.
Yeah, you do. I don't know. I mean, we
You got the totality of this that you got to look at as well too, right?
yes, but had I throw the draft picks out of the equation, they're almost laughable in the construct of this deal. Had I said on Friday, Dave, would you trade Minkah Fitzpatrick for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith? Had you put that to a poll question to our listeners, to Steelers Nation, how many of them do you think would have said yes?
There's a lot of people been hollering to get Minkah out of town. So, I mean, I don't know if it's 50-50, but I mean, there have been a lot of people saying, man, get Minkah gone. He's not the playmaker that he was, 2 or 3 years ago, which, obviously the stats don't lie. He hasn't made the plays and missed the games a couple of years ago. So, I don't know if you would have got, and I don't think you would have got a lopsided result of that poll either way, to be honest with you. It probably would have been split up the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to ask that in a leading sense to sit there and say that it would have been 5% said yes. I think there certainly would have been a clear number that would have been in favor of that. But I don't know if it's this overwhelming, 80% would have said, yes, you have to do that. I think a lot of people would have
Right.
pushed back and said, whoa, what was that idea even coming from? That's a crazy idea. You can get Ramsey for a day 3 pick and get Jonnu Smith for a day 3 pick. Why do you got to trade Minkah Fitzpatrick to close that deal? And of course, it doesn't consider the financials of it all and everything that we just talked about and the reports from Schefter and Rappaport. But would you have said yes to that had I asked you that question Friday, Dave?
I mean, and look, we still don't know all the specifics related to the money. I mean, we've got most of it here and all like that. I'd be interested to see the layout of Jonnu Smith. But I mean, if you told me everything that we know up until this point right now,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would say, yeah, do the deal.
I would have said no.
Okay.
And that's where I think I come from a little more skeptical eye towards this. I can get the thought and I can see the value in what Ramsey adds and what Jonnu Smith adds and the idea of 2 heads are better than 1. And if there is another shoe to drop at free safety, let's say you added Justin Simmons or something else is coming down the road, then Pittsburgh may justify it that way. But had you given me that scenario Friday, I would have said no.
Now, look, my opinion over the course of an hour and a half would have changed greatly because there's been so much of this that's broken from, because you just started off with you get Jalen Ramsey, right? And then you got Minkah, then you got Jonnu Smith added on into this, and then you got the more of the financials coming out with the money on Ramsey, and then obviously the 1-year extension with Jonnu Smith. So I mean, if you would have taken my temperature along the way here, you might have got a different response. But I mean, if you're asking me straight up now with what I know right now at this point, I would have said, yeah, you do that deal.
Okay, fair enough. And listen, when the news of Ramsey alone came out initially, I was excited. I was like, okay, it's kind of messy. I don't know how it's all going to work, but that's a good problem to have, and they're going to make it work. And you had, at the time, I thought Minkah and Deshaun Elliott and Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. and thought, okay, this is a really good group. You're going all in. You're loading up on the defense. You had a defensive heavy focus in the draft. Great. And then the Minkah thing came in, and I was floored by that, to be honest with you, as I'm sure most people were, and had to check it 5 times. And, my thoughts changed on that. And, obviously you have to consider the player and the production, but, Minkah, good guy in the locker room, quiet leader, but a leader all the same, tremendous film study, worked hard this offseason, was there for the OTAs, talked about how he had to He wanted to really attack the offseason. This is not a George Pickens, okay, you trade this guy because he doesn't fit the ideals and values of the team, and he's not a good teammate, and he's not buying in, and he's not fitting the culture of the group. Minkah fit the culture to a T. And you trade that player, that's just a lot to that locker room, okay, that this guy was deemed expendable despite all that he offered tangibly and intangibly.
Oh, I forgot to even name off the whole George Pickens trade as part of things that this team did this offseason too, right?
Right. I mean,
and plus this team still has their draft capital intact, so to speak, for 2026, right? So they managed to get because once again, I hate to keep going back to our initial talk about Jalen Ramsey and the likelihood of that happening. A lot of it was due to the messiness of what the contract and what the compensation was going to be.
Yeah, but there's also, okay, even if there's a short-term thing of a Justin Simmons or Ramsey moves to safety, who is your long-term free safety? I mean, if Slay's done after this year, which he probably will be, then Ramsey might go back to corner, or you have to draft a corner. If it's Justin Simmons, that's a short-term thing. You add free safety to your list of 2026 needs, I would think. I mean, unless something else comes, and maybe it does, but as things stand today, that's another now clear need.
Yeah, but now all Omar's worried about is I got to get this team over the hump. I'll worry about next year,
Sure, right. And
I mean, you're right. Those are questions that could come out of this. Is this team going to have to go back in for a free safety next year, or will they be looking one in free agency next year? How's that all going to play out? But I mean, this team has to get past this year first, and they got a lot. Mr. Rooney's the expectations are to they got to get that playoff win, and they probably better get a little bit more than that one.
I guess the thought I can't escape, and I mentioned it before, and I'll probably mention it time and time again throughout the offseason is, and maybe I'm wrong, but if you had traded for Jalen Ramsey, had the Rams traded for Jalen Ramsey, straight up pick for a player, the conventional deal, it's probably a 4th-round pick because of the contract you had to take on. You trade for Jonnu Smith, pick for player, it's probably a 5th-round pick or something like that, given all that we knew and expected. And to somehow that turns into giving up Minkah Fitzpatrick, I really struggle with that.
Okay. I mean, it had to be something crazy like this to get through the messiness of it, for sure, because of, especially when you got the 2 players involved, and the salaries and all like that, even though this team obviously could have gone above and beyond what I even projected them to spend in cash. I would have been shocked, but they could have made that work. But to get past the messiness overall, it seems, to me, the only way for this deal to have worked was the way it actually went down.
You don't think there's any other way to do this with contract restructures of a Pat Freiermuth, of an Alex Highsmith?
Oh, you could obviously kick, but you're not adding more cash to the expenditure that way. What you're doing is you're kicking the cap down the road. Now, obviously, you could have done that. You had 2 players sitting there that you could have gone and got another $14 million in cap space from, but you would be doing so at restructuring a couple of contracts, and the proverbial getting the sex selection of fan base pissed off at, oh, I thought we were away from restructuring these contracts.
Yeah, but
there's always a way to do it, but how much, here's the thing, how much actual for what would have cost you in realistic draft picks to get this all done and not move Minkah?
We probably thought of like a 4th-round pick. And what would you rather do? Trade a 4th-round pick and restructure a couple of contracts in an ever-expanding, ever-growing salary cap era, or trade Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Sure, and that's why I keep going back. I wonder how much more is there to this underlying thing about Minkah, though.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
There's lots of different bits and pieces that we'll never know the answer to here and can only speculate on, but you do have to have probably a meaningful, when you unequivocally can get anything done realistically from a cash and a cap standpoint, something beyond trading a guy, for lack of a better word, a cornerstone piece of the franchise away. There's more to it than meets the eye.
That's probably fair, and I think you're right about that. But I'm struggling to find what that exactly is. Because had I floated the idea of I trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. Something's going on there. Has I said that Friday? Even like that sounds crazy. That sounds like a crazy idea to just trade Minkah Fitzpatrick or believe that he was expendable or a root cause of the problem or something like that.
Right. Now, also too, if Minkah doesn't rebound this next season, and you're sitting here a year from now, and you're wondering if what could you get for a Minkah in a trade a year from now if he doesn't have the kind of bounce back year, and he's looking for an extension. How unhappy will he be if he's not getting one? Was he going to be? As I put in my 90 and 30 series, there was going to be a lot of talk about Minkah's future in this team with this team past the 2025 season if he didn't have a bounce back year.
Yeah, but you just said they're playing for right now, which I agree. I think they in many ways are. And if that become an issue, then maybe you trade Minkah next year. I said if he didn't have a great year, maybe you look to deal him or do something with Minkah at that point if his play still hasn't gotten to where it needs to be. Where you talk about cutting him, you talk about trading him, you talk about doing something then. It's hurting you in some sense for the here and now. But we will see. And there's also, from ESPN, Jeremy Fowler, I think others, saying the whispers about a Minkah trade began months ago in March. I think it's always convenient these things come out right after the trade as opposed to at any point before, because that was never reported by anybody at any point until post-trade.
Well, heck, even Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport just said within the last 48 hours or something that they didn't think Jalen Ramsey is going to get traded to the Steelers, right?
Right. You do see that, not dance, but you see the way insiders like to take their victory laps in some sense. Schefter was on McAfee today saying, yeah, I always thought if Ramsey was going to go somewhere, it would be Pittsburgh. And we literally have him on record 3 days ago saying Pittsburgh, unlikely destination. I think the Rams or Chargers are a lot more likely. So, you see, they unmask themselves in that sense. Everyone looks smarter after these things actually happen.
All right, Nick Corte from Over the Cap says, as for the Steelers, Jalen Ramsey has a minimum salary of $1.255 million per game, roster bonuses totaling up to $765,000, and an option bonus that should now be $17.48 million. The Steelers have until August 31st to decide whether to prorate the option, which will determine precisely what his cap numbers will be. So that's that's what we're looking as far as that goes. So, and then our buddy from Texans Cap says he wouldn't be surprised if Miami has already declined that option bonus and put that down. So we'll have to see if the Steelers still have the right to pick up that option or prorate the option bonus, and if they do, what will that do? And if not, if they take on the full, I don't know, it's almost looking like close to $20 million. If that's ultimately his cap charge for 2025 with Ramsey, then you're looking at an offset of around $4.5 million in cap space based on what you save from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So there's more details to come out here. Now, look, it's easy to look at this in a vacuum, as we said, and say, okay, player for player, Ramsey, Minkah here, that portion of it. But I tell you what's going to be interesting, Alex, is, when Minkah arrived to the Steelers, and even before he left Miami, he wasn't kind of afraid to kind of speak his mind, so to speak. And since he's been with the Steelers in certain interviews, he's not been afraid to speak his mind. It'll be interesting to see this first media session that Minkah does with Miami. Will probably be the most notable press conference of all coming up of all this deal, to see what Minkah maybe says and thinks led to his departure, being part of this trade to go out of Pittsburgh.
No question. I'll be very much anticipating that. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know if he's going to talk as like part of the trade, or if that's going to be a training camp thing when they report. I'm not sure what day does Miami report the training camp. They may be on a more veterans, rookies. A lot of teams have rookies report before veterans. Pittsburgh has everyone show up at once, so I don't know the date for Miami on that. Looks like rookies report July 15th, the veterans on July 22nd, according to the Palm Beach Post.
All right, Texans Cap chimes in, assuming Miami declined the option, Pittsburgh reworked with the new signing bonus aligning with their usual. So in other words, what he's saying is, assuming Miami declined the option, Pittsburgh would rework with a new signing bonus structure aligning with their usual contract structure. So I guess what he's saying here is we could see the Steelers, because Ramsey's still under contract for a couple of real years after this year, the Steelers might work down that cap charge a little bit when it comes to Ramsey for 2025. And as part of that process, I would imagine they would try to work out those per game roster bonuses, right?
I think. Can you just give me when is Jalen Ramsey signed through? When does his contract? Is it through 2028 still? Or could that
Ramsey's
change?
contract is, let's see, he's got real years through 2028, and then he's got 3 void years on top of that. I can't imagine the Steelers messing with any proration for the void years. So you've got at least 4 years that you could work with some proration if you wanted to, with whatever's left over from, say they take some of this money and turn it into a signing bonus or whatnot. All that being said, I would think that you're going to see Jalen Ramsey's cap charge, at least based on what's out there, probably under $10 million as part of this for 2025. And
but I'm just asking, like, when is he signed through? Because I'm just like, could that change at all based on the option if Miami declined it versus?
Well, he's got roster bonuses set up or option bonus set up in each of these remaining years here too. So it's still a year by year thing. And he's not guaranteed, at least not yet, any money past, unless they do something with this option bonus. And that's another reason to think that they will take a different route to what Texans cap is saying here. In other words, take a bulk of this turning into a signing bonus, because they're not going to want to defer that option bonus and turn it into guaranteed money past this year as part of this. So that makes even more sense that they'll prorate something, part of a signing bonus, in lieu of an option bonus, probably remove the per game roster bonuses from there, and then just make a decision on his contract next either August or March, I guess,
depending on when that option roster bonus is due, I should say.
Right, and that would make the most sense from the Steelers' perspective. Whereas they probably end up spending about the same amount of cash that they were going to spend on Minkah in 2025, not put any guaranteed money into past 2025, and then just see how Ramsey plays this year and whether or not they want him part of the team in 2026.
Okay. There you go. I'm going to need you to write an article on this, Dave, to figure all this out. Maybe that will take some time to get all the details in.
It will. It's going to take getting specifics on this, because there's 18. That, once again, this thing was so messy because of the option and potential trade compensation. That's made it hard to talk about them acquiring Ramsey via a trade. And there being some level of likelihood to it because of all this messiness. And obviously, Minkah helped ease some of that messiness.
Right. So no question, Omar Khan and Cole Marco, his right-hand man in the front office, burning the midnight oil to try to get this deal done and figure out how to make it work financially. I assume they have. We'll get details on that, and have already gotten a lot of details on that already. So this
thing just didn't materialize this morning. I'll tell you that.
This is probably multiple weeks of discussion and figuring out how to make this deal work on both ends, especially for Pittsburgh.
All right. So my gigantic takeaway as far as the cash and cap goes is that this team's probably going to end up saving a little bit of cap space and then using a little bit more cash overall. And then for people saying, well, this is great for TJ Watt, none of this really factored into TJ Watt, because they still had the cash hole that they needed to fill for TJ Watt. And then, by the way, when they get a deal done with TJ Watt, his cap number is likely to decrease by $8 or $9 million. So none of this was, in my opinion, revolved around getting Watt done, not done, anything along those lines as far as that goes. And I still expect this team to do something with Chris Boswell and adding cash in, from his aspect. I know Fowler's got out there that the team's still interested in Gabe Davis, and if something happens there, you're not going to spend a lot of cash or cap.
That's minimum. That's because Jacksonville's on the hook for the contract.
Right. So there's nothing. For lack of a better word, the Steelers are, outside of maybe going out and getting Justin Simmons on a cheap deal right now, and then maybe signing a guy like Gabe Davis on a minimal deal. I think this team is about done as far as moves go.
We got to wrap up soon, Dave. But on TJ Watt, should we be confident in saying a deal with Watt will get done, given that this is a Steelers team that clearly is willing to make moves that surprise us?
I'll be shocked if they don't get it done with him. They still got that cash hole, it seems like, sitting there. Is it going to take a while to get it done? Yeah. And if indeed the cash take for Ramsey's over $20 million, and you've gone out and you paid DK Metcalf, he's getting $35 million in cash this year. Watt pays attention to that. So sure. He knows this team's spending cash. He knows that him and his agent know this team has a lot of cash still to spend his direction here. Yes, they'll get a deal done with TJ Watt.
You'd be shocked if they didn't.
I'll be stunned. And look, I mean, the details of everything that happened today was pretty shocking.
Okay, I'm leading you to water here. I'm leading you to my trap, Dave. It's a trap. Were you stunned when they traded for DK Metcalf?
Not
on a $150 million contract to boot.
Not in the rearview mirror because of the cash situation.
I know, but at the time, everything looks clearer in the rearview mirror.
I'll tell you, I am more shocked about the details of this Minkah for Ramsey plus Jonnu Smith plus the cash transfer a lot more than I was shocked at the DK deal. But I understand the DK Metcalf deal a lot more than most because of the cash situation and aspect of them not being happy with George Pickens and want to spend money. That was it still shocking overall, a level of shockness that they went out and traded for him and then gave him the big deal. Yeah, absolutely. Because as once again, this team is, that's something the team just hasn't done before. And anytime you're talking about 20, 25, 30-year span about a team not doing something like that and them doing it, how can you not be shocked, right?
Well, I guess we're not going to wrap up here after all. According to Adam Schefter, quote, sources, in recent weeks, multiple teams have been discussing whether they can trade for Steelers standout TJ Watt, who skipped the team's most recent minicamp. Pittsburgh has not shown any willingness to deal Watt so far, but he's unhappy with his contractual situation, and sources believe outside team interest is likely to increase given today's trade, end quote.
I still would be shocked, Alex. I really would.
We are getting good timing on these segues today.
We are. We're living right as far as timing of getting a podcast done and stuff breaking within that.
I think Watt will get a deal done, but I can't say anything with confidence, and nothing will shock me given the patterns of this team.
Sure. I understand that. I would be shocked that two cornerstones of your franchise, two guys that you paid guaranteed money to and broke some rules for, if both of them go out the door this offseason.
I do think it's probably a lot of agent pressure here from the Schefter tweet, and I think teams just look at this and say, Pittsburgh's doing a lot of weird and un-Pittsburgh-like things. Let's see about TJ Watt. Why the heck not? The trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. Let's just see if there's interest in TJ Watt if that deal prolongs and the lack of a deal, I should say, prolongs. So stay tuned.
All right. Where do you think they still get the deal done? I mean, answer the question you asked me.
Yeah, I already said yes. I think they do get the deal done,
right.
But all bets are off when it comes to this offseason in particular under Omar Khan. I can't sit there and say 100%, shut up, forget about it, it's going to get done, no matter when. I think it'll get done. I'm along for the ride.
All right, and once again, look, I think once we get the full details of this Jonnu Smith contract and the Ramsey contract, and then obviously the Minkah stuff going outdoor. I think when it comes to a cash spending, it's not going to be like they spent another $20 million on top of it there. I think it's going to be a fairly close offset there. So that still leaves open, say, a $20 million cash hole that this team, $23 million cash hole that this team seems like they almost have to spend this season. So that's yet another reason why I think the Watt deal gets done, just from a cash spending perspective alone.
God only knows they trade for some other player, though. It's a player for player TJ Watt for
Well, then,
free
yeah, I
safety.
mean, obviously, then if you're getting the cash spent, then that offsets it.
Yeah. So stay tuned on that. But that's from Adam Schefter. And again, he does say Pittsburgh has not shown any willingness to deal TJ Watt. Teams can ask. Doesn't mean that Pittsburgh will listen or actually get involved in trade talk. So let's do the last thing here, Dave. You would ask me after Aaron Rodgers. I had to give you a happy or sad response to the signing of Aaron Rodgers. You said happy. I said sad. Happy or sad on this deal as you know it in current form? Minkah Fitzpatrick for Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey.
I mean, once again, if you had took my temperature, you might got a different answer throughout this thing. But from where I sit right now, I'm going to go on the happy side of it, just because we're seeing this team not stay status quo. And you get two playmakers in Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, and yeah, I'm going to have to go on the happy side of it, and I know which way you're going to go on it.
I'm going to be the Debbie Downer. I'm going to say the sad side. I do see the allure. I see the value. I certainly get the point about needing to do things differently and change, and to get a different result, you got to do things differently, not just the old Steelers tweak around the edges way. But I think Pittsburgh has already done a lot of that, and B, the main way to have success is through the trenches and through finding that quarterback, and they built up the trenches, and I praised them for that, and I praised them for the Metcalf deal, and I praised them for extending to Sean Elliott, and I understood trading George Pickens to a decent degree, but I think this still comes with a lot of risk, a lot of unknown, and I did not want to trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. I didn't want to trade him on Friday. I'll sit there and say I don't want to trade him on Monday either.
All right, but wait, there's more in this show.
Oh, is this the Jay Morrison part, or is there other breaking news? Because both equally likely at this point.
No,
so
we've got another segment to this show.
Yes, so we recorded this. We had finished this right before the Jalen Ramsey trade was announced, the first shoe to drop Monday morning. So I have a great Bengals beat writer, that is Jay Morrison, who covers the Bengals for Bengals Talk. Also has the Growler podcast with Paul Daner Jr. So check out Jay's work over on SI's Bengals Talk. Follow him on Twitter by Jay Morrison. We'll talk to hopefully other AFC North beat writers this week to get their perspective on what are probably less exciting off seasons for the other AFC North teams, but still plenty of note. And the Bengals have plenty of note, from T. Higgins to Jamar Chase getting their deals to what's going on with rookie Shamar Stewart and a whole lot more. So we'll take a pause and come back with Jay.
Okay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as promised, we are going around the AFC North this week, talking to the three beat writers and getting their thoughts with about a month to go ahead of training camps around the NFL starting. And first up for us to talk to old friend Jay Morrison. Jay covers the Cincinnati Bengals for BengalsTalk.com. That's the Sports Illustrated affiliated site for Cincinnati Bengals. And as usual, you can go there, BengalsTalk.com, read all of Jay's work. You can follow Jay on Twitter. You should already be doing so, by Jay Morrison. So with that, on this Monday, Jay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex. Happy Monday.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Glad to be with you.
All right, Jay, look, obviously, big season coming up for the Cincinnati Bengals. They kind of, I guess, were a little bit of a disappointment last year, because I think a lot of people had this team making the playoffs and potentially making a playoff run and all. They got off to a slow start, I believe 0-3, but they were able to kind of correct that, then went on a win streak at the end of this thing. Needed a little bit of help to get in. Didn't get that, and also big news to obviously get T. Higgins locked up during the offseason. So you have the big three of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, obviously set to roll in 2025. I guess the big talk so far these last or this offseason is on the defensive side of the football. And first and foremost, what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson? And the other aspect a lot of people are talking about is the first round pick, Shamar Stewart, who's yet, I believe, signed his rookie deal. So let's start with Trey Hendrickson. Jay, where do things currently stand with him? Are they going to get him done? Is this a guaranteed money past the first year aspect with this team? Just give us an update on Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. He seems fully dug in on the fact that he is not gonna play this season on his current deal, which would pay him about $16 million. The Bengals feel dug in that they're not gonna go above 30 million a year for a guy that is above 30 years of age. And deadlines make deals as this gets closer to camp or maybe well into camp once Trey starts sitting out practices and they start scuffling like they did last year. I know Jamar came in and won the Triple Crown, but it was a big deal. It was a big reason for the slow start, him sitting out all of training camp last year. And so it's going to come down to philosophy. Are they willing to pay Trey Hendrickson market value for a guy that, yeah, he's showing no signs of slowing down, but that's the problem. And I guess Pittsburgh's kind of dealing with it too with TJ Watt, where there's some positions where guys are playing deeper into their life, I guess, or their age. The edge rusher's not one of them. Wide receiver's not one of them. When those guys cross 30, they really do tend to slow down. They're such freaky athletic positions, and it's just hard to keep up that twitch and getting around the bend around the edge. And the scary part about it is you don't know when it's coming. It's not a gradual slope downhill. It's a cliff, and you're going along great, and then all of a sudden you're no longer relevant. And I think that's a big reason they drafted Shamar Stewart in the first round. And I think it's going to come down to Trey. Is he going to be willing to accept less? The Bengals don't seem interested in giving him a long-term deal unless it's going to be in the 28 million range. He wants something closer to 30, mid-30s. So this is going to drag out, I feel, well into camp, possibly into the regular season, with him saying he's not going to play games on this deal.
Does he, I mean, he's got a great argument, right? Obviously for his past production to be, the highest paid edge rusher. And obviously a lot of things have happened. You still got, well, you have to see what happens with Dallas and Micah Parsons, and obviously TJ Watt's still out there, and we're convinced Watt's going to get done. It's just a matter of when and how much. So you could see this thing with Trey Hendrickson perhaps even going into the regular season then, right?
Yeah. And see, the thing with Watt is he's been so much more dynamic. He's meant so much more to that team. He makes big plays in big moments. I don't know that you can say that about Trey Hendrickson. Yeah, he led the league in sacks with 17.5 last year, and he had 17.5 the year before. But the Steelers fans saw this. He closed that game. He had 3 sacks late in the game against the Steelers late in the year. He tends to get them in bunches in games when they have big leads. I went back and looked. Of his 17.5 sacks last year, 1 came when they were trailing or tied. He feasts when they're ahead, and you're hoping that that's going to be the case this year, that they're going to be playing with the lead a lot more. But he's not great against the run. There's a lot of knocks on his game. I don't think you can say that about TJ Watt. He does everything good. So I think that's kind of what's given the Bengals pause. And I do think that this could stretch, if not into the regular season, right up until that final weekend.
And what's going on? Shamar Stewart's got his feet dug in pretty well. I believe this is something related to possible offsets and guarantees and language about voiding the contract along those lines.
Yeah, so the Bengals want to put a clause in his contract that says they can void his guarantees if there are certain transgressions, and he's saying you have never asked a first round pick to have this clause in the contract before, which is correct. But all the players that have been drafted around Shamar, he was number 17, so guys that go 18, 19, 16, 15, a lot of teams have this clause in their contract, and the Bengals are just trying to it's precedent for them, but they're just trying to do what's kind of become a league-wide trend, and he and his agent are not having it, and not only are they not signing the contract, they are not signing, or they did not sign the injury waiver, as second-round pick Demetrius Knight did. Demetrius Knight practiced every single practice of the offseason. Shamar Stewart watched every single practice. He was not on the field at all, and it's head-scratching. Why did the Bengals draft this guy if they have those kind of concerns that they feel like they need to put this clause in for a first-round pick that you are drafting not only to be the succession plan to Trey Hendrickson, but to kind of give you some leverage in your negotiations with Trey Hendrickson. And now you've got the two guys who could be your two sack leaders this year unsigned a few weeks from training camp. It's head scratching.
An unusual situation, no question, Jay. Let's stick with Stewart, the player, though. The big question about him before he was the Bengals pick was the lack of college production. 4.5 sacks, 1.5 last season. Some chalk that up to scheme that didn't allow him to rush the passer. What did the Bengals see that they can believe once he gets on the field, he can become an impact pass rusher, getting more than 1.5 sacks?
Yeah, he's just such a freaky athlete, and that's what they're kind of banking on. It wasn't so much Texas A&M scheme that limited Shamar Stewart. It was the the opposing offense's scheme. That Texas A&M defensive line was something else, and teams weren't taking deep drops. It was 1, 2, 3, get the ball out, because they knew that they were going to be in trouble if they held the ball, and that's what the Bengals fell in love with. Not the sacks and and he did get a lot of pressures. He struggled like a lot of young guys do with finishing, but the plays he makes chasing things down on the edge and moving side to side and against the run and all the plays that, football scouts and coaches love, but don't really show up in stat sheets and most fans kind of overlook. He does all of that really well. And this team has been bad against the run for years. And part of that, Trey Hendrickson has not been great at setting the edge against the run. And so that's one of the big reasons they were attracted to him. But I still think the number one reason they went after him is because they knew that they were not likely to retain Trey Hendrickson beyond this year. And there's not a lot of other options on this team right now. You've got some guys that you're hoping. Miles Murphy was their first round pick a couple years ago. He's going into year 3 now, and this is a prove it year for him. I mean, he has really been I don't want to say a bust, but he's been a disappointment from where they drafted him. And Joseph Osai, they've got guys that have shown flashes but just haven't been consistent. And last year, if it wasn't Trey Hendrickson, they weren't getting a lot of pressure on guys. So they are counting on Shamar Stewart to ramp up the production, at least in terms of pressures. They're hopeful that he can finish and get some more sacks. I wouldn't be surprised to see him if he ever signs and gets in here and plays to have more sacks this year as a rookie than he did his entire career at Texas A&M, was with just 4.5. He had 1.5 each of his 3 years. So they like a lot about him. They think he can grow into the role as a finisher because of his athletic traits.
Talking with Jay Morrison here, who covers the beat for the Bengals. The big story of the offseason was getting the offensive core retained, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys re-signing. Was it a surprise to see Higgins get inked? And was there almost this pact between Chase and Higgins to stay because they signed at the exact same time? Was that a real intent for those guys? And how did the team get these deals done?
Yeah, initially I didn't think it was going to happen. And then T fired his agent, David Mulgeta, who has butted heads with the Bengals for years. He was Jesse Bates' agent when that thing drug out, and the Bengals eventually let Jesse walk in free agency. And he got rid of David Mulgeta and signed with Rocky Arsenault, who was Jamar Chase's agent. And then the writing was on the wall. They're going to work together to get this done. And they did. And they got it done at the exact same time. Still, I mean, I know the fans are thrilled to have T back. I'm still not convinced it's the right way to go to have that much money. When you've got Joe Burrow, you can have average receivers be great, but you're talking about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase having all this money against the cap. Burrow does as well, and then they go out and they give Mike Gesicki, the tight end, who's essentially a wide receiver. He plays mostly in the slot. They give him a 3-year, $24 million deal. So they have sunk a lot of money into this offense, and this defense was dreadful last year. And the big problem with the Chase and Higgins signing is, as the Bengals typically do, they drug their feet, and they didn't get it done before free agency, and that put them behind the ball. They didn't know what they had to spend because they were still trying to get those deals done. So they were basically on the sidelines for the first week of free agency, and they had a lot of holes to fill. And you're seeing all these guards and all these defensive tackles and all these edge guys go off the board. Affordable guys that should have signed. They lost the chance to get them, and so that is, I think, maybe going to cost them more than the value of the contracts, because they had one splash in free agency. It was TJ Slayton, a run-stopping defensive tackle, but they could have done so much more had they got those wide receiver deals done a week earlier.
Keeping the theme, Jay, on the defense, obviously last season, a lot of people pointed to that side of the football as being, the disappointing side, and a lot of focus was going to be on. It seemed like a lot of focus was going to be on the defensive side of football this offseason. Then you had all the stuff go on, or still going on, I should say, with Trey Hendrickson. We saw Jermaine Pratt go out the door a few weeks ago. I guess that wasn't hugely surprising, but I guess the big question is even though they drafted a guy in Shamar Stewart, and I think Barrett Carter was part of that draft class at inside linebacker, you've obviously still got a premier player in Logan Wilson over there. Has this defense, or is this defense expected to be better than the 2024 unit? And and is it going to be better enough, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, that's the question. It'll be better because it'll be hard to be worse. But how much can it improve? And you name the players they added. I think they are inconsequential in terms of improving this when you compare him to the guy they put in charge. They fired Lou Anarumo, who'd been the defensive coordinator since Zach Taylor arrived in 2019. They hired Al Golden, who was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, took him all the way to the national championship game, really did a great job with that defense. He was the linebackers coach for the Bengals when they went to the Super Bowl in 2021. So he was part of drafting Logan Wilson, and he's just everywhere he's been. Miami, Temple in college. He's been a head coach in college. That's kind of his trademark, is developing young players. So bringing him in, and the scheme he puts in, I think, is going to be a little bit different. They're going to see a lot more press coverage, but it's not so much the X's and O's as it is the development of these young guys. This team you go back and look at the last few drafts, and they have a ton of guys because they were set on offense, and they have a ton of defensive picks in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and none of them have really hit and been a splash. And they have got to get things out of guys like Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, Miles Murphy, DJ Turner, Chris Jenkins, and McKinley Jackson, the two defensive tackles they took last year in the second and third round. This team is loaded with potential on defense that hasn't been realized, and that's what's going to make this defense better if Al Golden can get those guys playing up to their draft slots.
And I guess the other question was, how much better can the offensive line be this year? Now, Joe Burrow just showed tremendous movement in the pocket once again. I think one of the things when you look at Joe Burrow and what he provides to this team is that ability to move within the pocket overall. But they would obviously like to have him probably take fewer sacks, less pressures, and maybe not have to move around as much. Have a great left tackle in Orlando Brown Jr. Marius Mims, obviously a first-round draft pick, dealt with some injuries and took a little while for him to get on the field last year. You got a veteran in Ted Karras at center. Got a new left guard, I think, coming over or via the draft, in Dylan Fairchild. We're both big Cordell Volson fans coming out as well, too. Going to be interesting to watch the battle there. And then I guess Lucas Patrick joins this unit as well, too. how much better is this offensive line expected to be, especially when you look at the I guess the two guard spots and where Amarius Mims is at coming into his second season.
Yeah, they are thrilled with Amarius Mims. I was talking to him the other day, before they left for the break, and I was just asking about the difference between him last year and this year, and he was just going into how everything last year you're just thinking so much and you're focused on technique, and that kind of gets you in trouble. He's like, it's all second nature now. And I asked him to rank his technique last year on the scale of 1 to 10. He said 3. So if that guy he played pretty well last year. If his technique was a 3 last year, he can really they see him as a future Pro Bowl tackle, and I wouldn't put it past him. The rest of the line is particularly the guard spots. It's kind of similar to the defense. They fired offensive line coach Frank Pollock, and they brought in Scott Peters, who knows the AFC North well. He was the assistant O-line coach to Bill Callahan in Cleveland for all those years. Spent 1 year in New England as the O-line coach there. Now he comes to Cincinnati. It's a different style. He's big on the hand striking. He's got an MMA background. One of the reasons they love Dylan Fairchild is he was a state championship wrestler in high school in Georgia, and he played pretty well for the Bulldogs. And that's my big question on offense is Dylan Fairchild going to be ready? They pretty much named him the starter when they drafted him, which is kind of odd. But the Cordell Volson thing is he's a guy that can really benefit from a guy like Scott Peters, because he was a 4th round pick and he started right away, got benched last year. He's not been a bust, but he just has failed to develop, and they and Cordell himself very, very hopeful that this change is going to be great for him. I think it's going to take an injury for him to win one of those starting jobs. You mentioned Lucas Patrick. He was a free agent signing from the Saints. I think it's going to be him and Fairchild on opening weekend. But if there's an injury to one of those two, or if one of them fail to produce in training camp, you've got Cody Ford, who's been here for a while, and he can play tackle and guard, and you got Volson waiting there. So they have some depth at that position, which they haven't had in the past, but it's still a bit of a question. That's the thing with Joe Burrow. Everybody thinks of pressure as coming off the edge. He's fine with pressure off the edge. You talked about how well he moves in the pocket. He can really maneuver and kind of deke those guys and get out and throw. It's the pressure up the middle that he really struggles with. And if those guards and Ted Karras at center has been really good, but he's getting older too. So if those guards aren't able to protect the way that they're hoping, this could be another year where he's running around for his life and making great plays, but also taking a lot of big hits.
We know Cam Hayward's taken Volson's lunch money a couple times in those matchups. So
more than a couple.
Yeah, for sure. Jay, a couple more questions for you. You mentioned a couple minutes ago about the slow starts, and last year the Chase situation maybe contributed to that, but these slow starts have been happening each of the last 3 seasons. Is there any examination top down from Zach Taylor, the front office, about why the Bengals are habitually a slow starting team?
Yeah, there's a couple. Number one is Joe Burrow. He's been dealing with injuries a lot. Either coming back from the knee surgery, coming back from the wrist surgery last year. 2 years ago, it was the first practice, and he has the calf strain that
Right.
keeps him out for a few weeks. It seems like it's always something with him. So that's been a big part of the slow starts. The other is after that 2021 Super Bowl run, they talked about that was the first year with the 17-game schedule, and they talked about how they played the longest season in NFL history, and they really took it easy in OTAs and even into training camp with their mind on keeping bodies healthy and being good at the end of the year. And they've continued that, and it's come at a cost. They've started slow and they've finished fast, and that is a big focus. They did a lot more in OTAs this year of good on good, instead of just kind of in the past, the 7-on-7 stuff would almost be walk-through speed, and this was full speed, starters against starters, really competitive, got the juices going. So that was one step forward. They've also been very reluctant to play their starters in the preseason, and Zach has said that's changing this year. They fully intend to get guys in preseason games. I think it's risky, obviously, but I think you can call a game plan that gets the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands fast, and you don't worry about him taking hits in the preseasons. Nothing's guaranteed, but they'll be smart about it. And then it's just the mindset where I think they lean back on the fact that they know that they're good finishers and they know it's a long season, and there's just has never felt like that urgency has been there. And the league has kind of played into that too. They opened against the Browns that season a couple years ago, and everybody like chalked that up as a win, and the Browns just killed them 24-3. Last year they opened against the Patriots, supposed to be the worst team in the league. Everybody's chalking that up to a win. They lose 16-10. Washington wasn't supposed to be good, and they lose that in a thriller in week 3. And it's kind of the same this year. They've got Cleveland and Jacksonville to open the season. They are trying to renew. It's not so much what they do to get ready for week 1. It's how they mentally approach week 1. They need to come out with more fire and urgency. And, you would think they would get sick of talking about it after all these slow starts, 1-11 in weeks 1 and 2 under Zach. But they've been happy to talk about it. They are saying how they're viewing it different. They're saying that they're excited. Zach is also changing up the training camp this year. They've always been a 3 to 5 or a 4 to 6 p.m. Or a 2 to 4 p.m. Practice time in training camp. They're going to go mornings this year, 10 to 12, and then do the walkthrough in the evening, and then the guys can go home, study, get ready to come back for practice the next day. So they're changing some things up. They know it's been a big problem and a big reason they didn't make the playoffs last year, and they're not shying away from it. They're admitting these changes need to be made, and they're making them.
Wait, can you repeat that back? They're 1-11 in weeks 1 and 2 under Zach Taylor?
Yes.
That is. We love a good stat of the weird around here,
Yeah.
Jay, and that is a quality stat of the weird. Not for you guys, but just wow, that one really hits you and puts it in perspective. But great information about how the Bengals are going to try to change that. Jay, my last question for you, then I'll let Dave finish things out. What are expectations for the Bengals? Is this Super Bowl or bust, or for a team that has struggled and had some injuries, hasn't made the playoffs the last 2 years? Is it to just get in the postseason, make a run? How do you think the Bengals and the Bengals fans are stacking Cincinnati up compared to your Kansas Cities, your Buffaloes, and your Baltimores?
Yeah, I think in their mind, in the fans' mind, it is Super Bowl or bust. I don't know that the front office sees it that way. I don't think Zach Taylor is going to be in trouble if they don't make a run to the Super Bowl, but it's certainly there. And they felt, and I think some other teams in the league might have felt too, that had they got the help they needed and snuck into the playoffs last year, nobody was going to want to play that team. As bad as the defense was, you get Joe Burrow and that offense in that situation, and I don't think anybody would have reveled to have that matchup. So yeah, they think the defense is going to be improved this year if they can just climb into, I don't know, the top half, top 18 even. This offense is going to make a difference, because you look at the slow starts, a lot of that was on the offense last year. That game they lost to New England in week 1, 16-10. The defense played fine in that game. So if this offense can get ahead, play with some leads, as bad as this defense was last year, they were 7th in the league in takeaways. And they was doing it from playing from behind a lot of the times. If they can get some leads and really kind of force the game plan of the opponent, I really think this can be a special team if it stays healthy.
Jay, we've had a lot of conversations this offseason about on the podcast and back and forth with listeners via emails and all like that about what makes a Super Bowl caliber team, especially at this time of the year. And, we've Alex and I have each laid out kind of like 4 different things. And in my view, it takes an above average quarterback. It takes a good running game. It takes a top 10 defense. And then what kind of a shoot off of that takeaways on the defense as well too. And obviously the Steelers are going to have a lot of questions about what version of Aaron Rodgers they're getting this year, but other than that, it looks like this team is at least poised to have a top 10 defense this year. We expect the takeaways to be there. We expect them to be better, at least to some degree, running the football and above average play out of Aaron Rodgers. But with all that said, neither Alex or I, at least at this point of the offseason, have the Steelers as a Super Bowl caliber team. We both, however, at least I do, have the Bengals as a Super Bowl caliber team, even though I accept the fact that I kind of wonder about this defense, and I kind of wonder about the running game with them. But I'm just so enthralled with what the big three of Burrow, Higgins, and Jamar Chase add to this that I don't think you can overlook that. That's the big reason why I do have them as a Super Bowl caliber team. How do you define a Super Bowl caliber team at this point of the offseason? And do you indeed believe the Bengals are a Super Bowl caliber team?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of a moving definition. I mean, it starts with the quarterback. You got to have a really good franchise level quarterback, and they've got that. You have to be able to score a lot because you're going to play good defenses in the playoffs, and you've got to be able to counter that. And they've got that. Um, I don't know if you need to be a top 10 defense anymore. It helps certainly,
Mhm.
but the run game is a big thing, and I think that's the one reason that really kind of pushes them into that caliber for me. They haven't been special in the run game because they haven't run a lot. They've been a throw first team and more dropbacks than any team in the league that for a number of years. And Chase Brown last year was one of the best running backs in the league in the second half of the season, and they are expecting very just special season from that guy, and it's not just running the ball. He did it last offseason, he's done it this offseason. He's worked with a wide receiver coach and worked on route running and getting out of breaks, and he took a big step in that last year, and I think you're gonna see him, for any of you guys, and I know a lot of you probably do, any of you guys that play fantasy, he should be high on your board. He is going to be heavily involved in this offense because not just in setting up things, but if things go according to plan and they are playing with the lead, he's going to get a lot more carries in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter. Another thing that I think gets overlooked when you're talking about Super Bowl teams, and it's a chicken and egg argument. Is team chemistry create winners, or does winning create team chemistry? But team connectivity is a really big thing, and this is a connected, tight team. We've seen all the shenanigans with Jermaine Burton, the third round pick last year, and they've stood by him and treated him like a big brother, and he seems to be on the right track. And that's just one more weapon that if he keeps his head on straight. An interesting thing going back to your point about what they've done different this year. Zach Taylor has made that a point that during meetings in OTAs, he will get someone up there, usually a young guy, and have them present whatever they're talking about that day, whether it's third down stuff or whatever they're working on in practice. And they will get up there and go over the film and present. And other times, they will just get up in front of the room and the player will tell his story, how he got to the NFL, what he overcame and all that. And it's about getting these guys to know each other as men and be a connected team. It did not feel like a connected team last year, and I think that was a big part of their struggles. So I think they've got all the intangibles, and if top 10 defense is an absolute criterion for making the Super Bowl, then there should be heavy doubts, but I'm not sure it is. I think with this offense, that if that defense can be in the middle of the pack range, then yes, they will be a Super Bowl team or
Jay,
caliber team.
I got you. Jay, who's the steal of the draft or steal of the undrafted free agent class, if you will, for the Bengals in 2025?
Well, I might counter what I just said about Chase Brown, but he is a smaller guy, and you do worry about workload. So they took a running back out of Texas Tech, Taj Brooks, in the 6th round. And you guys follow the draft. This was a great draft class for running backs. Taj Brooks would have been a 3rd, 4th round pick in most years. I think he is really gonna add to this offense, and he might make a guy like Samaje Perine expendable. They've got Zach Moss coming back off of injury. It's going to be interesting to see how that running back room shakes out. But Taj Brooks is he just looks the part. And I know they're not tackling or anything in this time of the season, but just the way he moves with the ball in his hands, and I think he's going to be, as a 6th round pick, a really big piece of this offense that can help take it to the next level.
Mix in unfortunate passing of Dave Parker over the weekend and all. He obviously played for the Pirates and the Reds. Any any interactions with Dave Parker and any quick stories or anything, and just talk a little bit on Dave Parker.
Yeah, so I was covering the Reds this weekend for the Associated Press, just doing some freelance work, and they had this ceremony on the field for the 50th anniversary of the 1975 World Champions, and there's this big celebratory mood. And then the team leaves, and they get ready to do the national anthem, and they put it up on the board that moment of silence for Dave Parker, and this audible gasp from in the press box from the crowd. Like, I knew he had Parkinson's and he was dealing with it, but I didn't know he was that close to passing. It's just so sad. 4 weeks away from going in the Hall of Fame. I never talked to him in person, but the thing I go back to, my greatest memory of him, and it wasn't from his time with the Reds. It was that All-Star game in Seattle when I can't remember who he threw out at the plate, but he was with the Pirates at the time, unleashed
Right.
a missile from right field to Gary Carter to
Yep.
nail the runner at the plate, and that play is just burned in my brain. I don't even remember what year it was. It was early '80s, but it was right when I first started getting into baseball seriously, and that's my Dave Parker moment.
Yeah, we're about the same age, Jay, and that always obviously I grew up and got to see the World Series team and all like that Parker was a part of, but that's burned in my image in my memory as well too, him and that great throw from right field in the All-Star game there. All right, Jay, well look, we're gonna look on having you on a couple of times during the season to preview the Bengals and Steelers, and in the meantime, tell people what they'll find over at Bengals Talk and the podcast that you do.
Yeah, the Growler podcast I do with Paul Dehner Jr. We have a lot of stuff in the off season. We go back and we'll rewatch a favorite game of the Bengals and kind of break it down. We'll have podcasts 2 or 3 times a week during the season, recapping the previous game, previewing the upcoming game. Again, you can find the Growler podcast on YouTube on all the platforms. BengalsTalk.com. I've created you guys talked about your stats of the weird. Well, I have stat of the J. I like to come up with a weird stat and have one of those up. If not I try to do every day, but it gets hard in the off season. But then all the standard Bengals coverage as well there. And you can follow me, like you guys said, on X at by Jay Morris.
All right, Jay, we appreciate you coming back in, especially this time of the off season here, and we'll be checking in with you probably closer to the start of the regular season and definitely during the regular season as well. So we appreciate you sitting in on another episode of the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.
Thanks, guys. Look forward to coming back.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Again, our special thanks to Jay Morrison. Go check out his work at SI's Bengals Talk and check out his podcast, The Growler, with Paul Dehner Jr. Follow him on Twitter at by Jay Morrison. So you would have heard Jay a little bit earlier in the show, had everything else not happened today, Dave, but still great information about a Bengals team that also has a lot of expectations this season.
Yeah, great to hear from him. We'll have him on during the season a couple of times as well, too. It's been an eventful morning, the way this all pieced together. I think we got over a 2-hour show as a result of this. We obviously didn't get to any of the 90 and 30. We got plenty of time the rest of this offseason to do that. We hope to have the remaining 2 AFC North beat writers on the Wednesday and Friday show, and we got a live stream tonight, right?
We do, 7 p.m. Eastern time. That was already planned. So again, planning, it's been working out pretty well for us today. So we'll talk about everything we talked about today and more on tonight's live stream.
All right. No emails today. We'll try to get to some later on in the week. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. If you want an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar, and follow the directions that way. So until either later tonight on a live stream or on Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.